Welcome to Florida's Wealthy Divorces, Complex Cases, Expert Advice.
Welcome back to Florida's Wealthy Divorces, Complex Cases, Expert Advice with me, Stacy Beaulieu-Fawcett. I'm a divorce attorney here in Florida and your host. Today, we're talking about a topic that comes up all the time in my cases. What happens when divorce involves a child with autism or other special or developmental needs? We see it all the time, but the difference in how we handle the cases is what we're going to talk about today. My guest today is Jamie Bassos with Bassos Consulting. She's a board-certified behavior analyst and an expert witness who helps courts, lawyers, and families understand kids' needs in these complex family law cases. I'm so happy to have you, Jamie. I've been looking forward to this episode.
Thank you. I'm really excited to be here. Excited for the conversation.
Yes. So in your own words, who are you and what is Bassos Consulting?
Sure. So you did a great job introducing me. I'm a licensed board certified behavior analyst. I've been licensed since 2009. I've been in the field for a little over 25 years working with this population, specializing in autism, behavior disorders, learning differences, and have been around the block, you could say. I started my career back, I was a freshman in college, and the psychology department was looking for individuals who liked kids, who, they were fun, creative, wanted to work with kids who had autism. And I didn't even know what autism was back in 2001. And so I was looking for a job and it was meant to be. So applied for the job, got the job, and started working with this population and completely fell in love with the science. So I learned all about applied behavior analysis, which is the proven treatment for individuals with autism spectrum disorder. And it all just clicked for me and made sense. I mean, we were teaching these small children who were not speaking, were not able to communicate their wants and needs, to talk and to express, what they were feeling, what they were thinking, what they needed. And it was kind of magical as, a young adult just entering the psychology department to kind of see this amazing progression from no skills to so many in such a short amount of time with this population that was, it was challenging to get them services. A lot of people didn't even know what they needed back in 2001.
Right.
So that's how I sort of fell into this world and working with this population and this science. And throughout my career, I've done, all of the different environments that, these children are in. So I've been working in the homes, I've been working in the clinics, the schools, and throughout my career, for the last 13 years, was with a startup that started as one location based out of Virginia and grew to 19 across the country. So was working on developing a home-based and clinic-based ABA program that is now nationally recognized as one of the top providers in the country. And through that process was pulled into lots of different situations where families were going through divorces and a lot of cases that, we had clinicians who were pulled in to serve as an expert or provide testimony or provide data. And clinicians in my field they're not super comfortable with that part of our work.
No.
They tend to shy away from talking to attorneys and judges. They don't want to go to court. So I was called in to do a lot of that work for them or with them. And through that process, found that it was so beneficial for the families and for the courts and for the lawyers to really understand these children and what their needs were to make better decisions when you're looking at custody situations. And so through that, I saw the benefit and I was like, this is such a needed part of our field. And people they're either shying away or they're refusing to talk and they just want to stay in their lane and do the clinical stuff. But I was like, this is needed. This is not happening for families and this is important. And I want to be a big part of that. So
true. It's so true. And it's so I just want to back up a minute because I noticed something in your story, which is we don't sometimes pick our careers. Sometimes our careers pick us, right?
Yes.
And I think that's hearing you describe that. I think that's what happened. You didn't even know. You just, you're in college. You're just doing this thing, and look where you are today. And so successful in doing it and helped so many families. But what you're saying is absolutely true. So many times I have cases where the children are under treatment or with a provider, and the client will tell me, well, the provider was telling me that this child should not be around mom or dad, or shouldn't have to stay overnight at mom or dad's. And I'll say, okay, let me talk to them. As soon as they know that the attorney wants to talk, oh, no, I'm not getting involved in this. If you're going to get me involved in this, then I will not treat your child anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And horrible situation to place the family in, the child in. And so now we're dealing with, okay, so let's get another expert involved, another evaluator involved to work with the child who has no experience with the child. A lot of times the experts that we'll see in court, they're not even familiar with autism to the extent that you are, to the extent that they are crafting a parenting plan for that. They're just more familiar with testifying in court and in their field in general, not really with the in-depth awareness that you have. And I love that. I love what you bring to the table, and you're just such a unicorn.
Oh, thank you.
So was there Jamie, thinking back to when you made this transition from do you call it a practitioner? Is that a fair, being a
Yeah.
practitioner?
Yeah.
Okay.
Practitioner, clinician. Mm-hmm.
Okay. All right. So from being a clinician, that's a better word. I knew there was a better word. So when you made that transition from being a clinician to stepping into my world, the court world, was there a particular family or a particular case that stands out in your mind that you're like, okay, yes, this is what I need to be doing?
Yes. I mean, we always have these like pivotal moments in our career, right? That kind of
Yeah.
take us down a different path or give us an idea or see that there's a need somewhere else and we could be filling that space. So I was working with this family, 7-year-old little boy, we'll call him Marcus, and significant communication delays, tons of challenging behavior. I mean, he was engaging in self-injurious behavior, aggression at school, wasn't really sleeping at night. And we spent the majority of, 2 years really working with parents on, establishing those routines. We had a great behavior plan in place. He was receiving ABA therapy at home and at school, and working with both mom and dad, through that process. And so everything was going great. Mom and dad are getting divorced now, and they're going to be splitting time. And the schedule was, 50-50 between mom and dad's house. So now every day the boy was going to be having these, not every day, every 2 to 3 days, there was a transition between homes. He stayed in the same school, which was good. But what we started seeing was a huge regression in communication. So his communication dropped, self-injurious behavior spiked, aggression at school was getting worse. I mean, we saw a clear change in challenging behavior once the transitions started increasing between homes. Right. And it was clear, like, here we're collecting data the whole time, which is another part of what I love about my field, is everything is data-based. There's no like figuring it out or making assumptions. It's clear cut. What happened? What changed? You can
Right.
tell, like, what are the environmental factors that are contributing to changes in behavior? And you can pinpoint to the day and to the time, here's when everything changed for this child. So we were able to say, listen, every time there's a transition between homes, there's, a spike in challenging behaviors. What is going on here? And it's, parents were doing the best they could, right? They're going through this challenging time. They're both trying to, figure out how they incorporate the behavior plan into their new home, their new lifestyle, right? Mom was the primary caretaker at the time, and dad was working late nights and wasn't really involved in the therapeutic care. So was trying to follow the behavior plan, but maybe wasn't as strict with it as he could be. Anyway, so fast forward, and me being the clinician, not even knowing like what impact I could have for this case, I approached the family and the family's lawyer and said, listen, I think we need to do something about this 50-50 thing because it's not working. The
Right.
transitions are too intense for this child. He needs a warning. We need visual schedules. We need a sensory safe bedroom because the challenging behaviors were so intense. And he had that sensory safe bedroom at mom's house, but not dad's. So, we needed to make sure that, with this regression, with these, switching homes every 2 to 3 days, we we saw such a change in the challenging behavior. We needed to do something to fix it. So, and then on top of that, you have parents blaming each other, right? Because that's what they do. It's mom's fault. She's too rigid and the rules are stressing him out, or dad's not following the behavior plan. So it's dad's fault. But the real problem was just the transition schedule, not the parents' competence or involvement with their child. So,
Right.
I told the attorney, I'm like, listen, no one's looking at the data. No one understands the behaviors here. Let's go to the judge and show him that, this is why this is happening. Here's the reason behind these challenging behaviors. And here's why we need to change the schedule to make sure that everybody's on the same page and how to keep this child safe and get him back to where he was, responding appropriately across these different environments. So I provided the data, the report, the testimony, and we worked on modifying the schedule to longer blocks at each house, fewer transitions. And then within 6 weeks, Marcus was back on track and responding across homes in a different way. And then I was like, okay, like they just need to understand what's happening here. There's no, they're making assumptions and they're blaming each other, right? It's mom's fault, it's dad's fault.
Yes.
It's no one's fault. It's behavior.
Right. Right. And that sounds like that was a case where both parents understood and were trying to do the best that they could. And both parents were healthy, stable parents, right? Am I getting that right?
Absolutely. Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
And they wanted the best for their kid and they just couldn't figure out how to make it work without
Mhm.
becoming so upset with each other. So coming in as a neutral, like here, I'm
Yes.
here for the child. What is going to be best for this child? And how do we modify this schedule and modify the home so that it's a good plan, it's a good match for both parents.
That's such a critical point, I think, is that you're not there to try to advocate for one parent to lose their time sharing or the other. It's really just about what is going to be best for this child. You're that neutral, like you said, that what is going to be best for this child. I think that's so important. So many times we're dealing with that situation, but then we also have a parent who either is in denial about the special needs of the child or is in denial that all of these precautions or structures are necessary, or has their own mental health illnesses that they're dealing with that make it to where they cannot handle or do what they need to do to properly support the child. And that you can imagine if that child was having so much struggle with two parents who were really high functioning and doing the best that they could, and then you add in there a parent maybe that is not, and the effect that it must have on that child when we start making these additional changes.
Yeah.
Since you've had those too.
Absolutely. And that's where the team, that team-based approach comes into play and is so important, working with all of the team members across the child's life, right? All the therapists, all the school, the other providers, and looking at what, as a parent, what do I need to be most successful here too? Like, do I need support? Do I need additional, people in the home to help with my own, caregiver training? And, what am I going to be able to do to support myself in this process and then to be able to best support my child in this process?
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely. So we've learned a little bit so far for our listeners about what an expert witness would do in a case like this, meaning we understand you're collecting data, you're spending time with the child, and you're monitoring and seeing what the child's needs are. Tell us a little bit more about what you do as an expert witness in these types of cases.
Sure. So typically, what I'm called in to do is initially a functional behavioral assessment. So, what that involves is looking at the child across all of their different environments. So if they're already in two homes, going and doing observations across those two homes, school, community, and really understanding why the behaviors are happening, if there are challenging behaviors are happening. Not every child on the spectrum or with, developmental differences and special needs engages in challenging behavior. So, but sometimes they do, and a lot of that is communication and figuring out what are they trying to tell us? What is the reason that these behaviors are happening? And so through that functional behavioral assessment, I'm able to figure that out. So get to the bottom of the reason. So why are these behaviors happening? And then looking at all of those other different areas of functioning. So how are they learning in school? What are their learning needs? And how are they, looking at communication and social development and daily living skills? We're looking at all the different areas, all the domains, to make sure that all of their needs are being met. And if they're not, what can we be doing to meet those needs across all the environments? And then what I'll also do is put together a report of recommendations for continued services. So if they're already receiving services, I'm doing a full records review to see how things are going. Has there been any changes in challenging behavior? When did those start to happen? Why did those start to happen? So, parents can address and kind of report on, hey, things are changing and things are getting worse or things are getting harder. But it's all just observational. There's no clear understanding of why. And the functional behavioral assessment, the FBA, gets to that reason for all those different areas. And so that's where I typically start.
Okay. So that's kind of your product, if you will, is this functional behavioral assessment that when you're done not done because I don't know that it ends, but when you're working with the family, you're working towards the end product, the end goal, this functional behavioral assessment, correct?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And then that is the product that we would expect, or the end result of the report and recommendations that we would expect the attorneys to be able to go into court and present to the judge if no resolution could be reached based upon that report.
Yes. And the best part about it, honestly, from my perspective, is that it makes sense. So my field is full of lots of jargon and things that, science terminology. So what I like to do and what I think I'm really good at is explaining behavior in a way and explaining this child's needs and diagnosis in a way that everyone can understand and get on the same page with. I'm not coming to the judge and saying, here's all this behavioral science jargon that nobody understands. And the reason the behaviors are happening is you're not going to understand what I'm saying. It's really spelled out and defined so that they can take that product and make sense of it, and then also use it to develop a plan that's going to make sense, especially for the parenting plan and for custody situations.
Right.
So here's how we understand this child in a way that's different from a typically developing child, right? Because it's not can't be just cookie cutter, copy paste. It really is unique to that individual and what their needs are.
Right. And I think it's important for the listeners to know that when you hire an expert like yourself or other experts as well, it doesn't mean, oh gosh, this means I'm going to go all the way to trial and this is going to be completely litigated. Because a lot of times in my experience, and let me know it's probably the same as yours, a lot of times hiring an expert such as yourself and getting this functional behavioral assessment guides the settlement.
Yes.
It helps get it settled because now we have somebody who has come in, whether it's an expert for one side or a neutral, and has prepared this information that we can all take in and say, okay, I see that this is what's in Johnny's best interest, made up name, of course, that he really needs the stability for longer periods of time during the week, or he really needs X, Y, and Z sensory room, or whatever the case may be. And then we're able to come to an agreement.
Yes.
So more often than not, in my experience, bringing in an expert helps get our case settled versus, oh, that's it. That means the gloves are off. We're going to trial. Yours as well.
Right. And that's the majority of the cases I work with. I've been to trial a handful of times, but I'm typically called in before you need to go there. And they are able to take my report of recommendations and just use it as a guide for what's going to be best, going forward.
Good. Good. Okay, well, I know that we're getting close to being out of time, and I have so many more questions I want to ask you. So if you will stick around, we can do a part 2 of this, and then that way our listeners can get more information, because there's just so much to cover, and I hate that we have to end so quickly. So will you hang out with me, Jamie, for another episode?
Absolutely. Love to.
Perfect. So we're going to pause here. Like I said, pick us up on part 2 of this. And thank you for tuning in to Florida's Wealthy Divorces, Complex Cases, Expert Advice with myself, and today with Jamie Bassos. To connect with me or our firm, head to blgfl.com and be sure to like, subscribe, and review.
Thanks for watching. Be sure to hit that like and subscribe button and leave us a review in the comments.